The early 1940s were the golden age of the Third Reich. In April, German troops invaded Denmark and Norway. 2 months later, these countries capitulated. In May 1940, Wehrmacht troops captured Belgium and the Netherlands. 1 month later, the Germans marched into Paris. Fascist Italian leader Benito Mussolini aimed to control the Mediterranean. He viewed it as his sphere of influence. Berlin raised no objections, fully aware of his ambitions. Hitler was riding high, but the British forces in the Mediterranean proved to be more than the Italians could handle. Mussolini's power weakened in 1943 after Italian defeats and the Allied landing in Sicily. Rescued from house arrest in Abruzzo by Germans, he narrowly avoided imprisonment after Italy broke its alliance with the Reich. Consequently, German units began disarming Italians on Crete, leaving them with limited options. They were either interned in Germany for forced labor or deployed as legionary units to fight on the side of the Third Reich. On Crete, the Nazis seized Italian equipment, including the naval transport Capo Pino. It was renamed Petrella. By February 1944, the fully loaded vessel embarked on its final voyage.
The Petrella was a cargo passenger ship carrying over 3,000 interned Italians and 1,500 German troops from Crete to mainland Greece. On February 8, it was attacked by the British submarine HMS Sportsman. The torpedo strike claimed the lives of more than 3,500 people.
Heading north from Crete, the Petrella was spotted through the periscope of a British submarine. The HMS Sportsman fired 4 torpedoes, 2 of which struck their target. The Petrella remained afloat for 4 hours. Out of 5,000 people on board, only 500 Italians and 500 Germans survived. German guards prevented Italians from escaping holds, exacerbating the situation while awaiting Kriegsmarine help. This significantly increased the death toll. 3 months into the Soviet campaign, Wehrmacht troops had reached Crimea, nearly capturing their primary objective, Sevastopol, by late October 1941. Evacuation of party officials and the wounded from the besieged city commenced via passenger liners. One of them, the Armenia, on November 6, took on board several thousand wounded and medical personnel from 11 Sevastopol hospitals and set sail at night. In the dark, the transport ship could pass unnoticed by German aviation.
The Armenia, a 2-funnel motor ship, operated routes between Odessa, Crimea, and the Caucasus until 1941. Converted into a hospital ship at the start of Hitler's Eastern Offensive, it was eventually sunk by German aircraft on November 7, 1941, resulting in up to 9,000 fatalities.
Due to the hasty evacuation, no one kept an exact count of the passengers on the Armenia. Estimates ranged from 4,000 to 10,000 people on board of the ship. The steamer's initial destination was the port of Tuapse, but the Armenia set a course for Yalta. A new order to transport party officials, NKVD officers, and their families disrupted the ship's nighttime travel plan. German aviation had long targeted Soviet ports in Crimea. The overcrowded ship headed out to sea to have a chance to maneuver, rather than remaining a stationary target in the port. The ship was marked with red crosses which identified it as a medical transport that the Geneva Convention prohibited from being attacked. 4 anti-aircraft guns were installed on the ship's deck, which turned the Armenia into a military target, as only unarmed ships were considered medical transports. On November 7, 1941, a stormy and rainy sea saw an aircraft appear above an evacuation ship around 11 a.m. It was a German Heinkel torpedo bomber. Armenia's anti-aircraft guns couldn't reach it. 2 torpedoes from its wings accurately struck the target. The overloaded Armenia sank in 4 minutes. Only 8 people were saved from the sinking ship. According to estimates, between 5,000 and 9,000 of the ship's passengers perished. For a long time, the Soviet Union did not mention the catastrophe of the liner Armenia. The actual location of the shipwreck was found in 2020, 15 miles off the coast of Yalta. Another large-scale sinking involved a turbo-electric ship that struck a sea mine in the Gulf of Finland. Its name was Josef Stalin. It goes without saying that talking about the destruction of a ship with such a name was dangerous.
The Joseph Stalin was a 7-deck Soviet cargo passenger turbo-electric ship. After the start of the war, it was used as a military transport, BT-521. It sank in the Gulf of Finland between December 3 and 5, 1941, with over 2,000 of the more than 5,000 people on board perishing.
The Joseph Stalin ship took part in the critical evacuation of Soviet forces from Tallinn and Hanko. On its final voyage, the 7-deck ship carried 5,500 soldiers and officers, 10 times its standard capacity. 2 destroyers and 6 minesweepers were escorting it in a convoy. On December 3, during the passage of Soviet minefields, Joseph Stalin left the trawled strip. An explosion on the port side, caused by striking a mine, disabled the turbo-electric ship's steering. Drifting into the minefield, it hit 2 more mines, severing its bow and stern.
A sudden flash of colossal power pierced the ship, completely blowing right through to the masts. And the people standing on the upper deck were thrown up there.
Even though the ship began to list heavily, it remained afloat. Escort ships managed to rescue fewer than 2,000 people, while another 3,000 remained on board and drifted at sea for 2 days.
Some tried to land on the Estonian coast, but failed. Everyone was carried out to the open sea, and only after 2 days of storms did the Germans arrive. In total, during the period from the 5th to the 14th of December, they captured 3,100 people from this very vessel. Around 1,000 people perished as a result of the flooding of 3 cargo holds and the explosions of the mines. For a vessel that didn't sink, these are, frankly, massive human losses.
According to non-Russian accounts, the death toll on the Joseph Stalin exceeds 2,500 people. The remains of the ship were visible above the water off the coast of Estonia until quite recently. The Goya was a Norwegian transport ship mobilized into service for the Kriegsmarine with an extensive service record. It served as an auxiliary ship for German submarines and later as a floating base for the Third Reich's U-boat crews. By 1945, it was decommissioned. The transport served as a target for naval gunnery practice. But towards the very end of the war, the Goya was called upon to participate in Operation Hannibal.
Operation Hannibal was the Third Reich's evacuation effort, moving both civilians and troops from East Prussia, Courland, and East Pomerania between January 13 and May 8, 1945. During these 4 months, over 2 million people were evacuated across the Baltic Sea to the western regions of Germany. In terms of the number of people and troops transported, Operation Hannibal is considered the largest maritime evacuation in history.
The Goya set out on its final voyage on April 16, 1945. The ship had already evacuated over 19,000 residents of East Prussia. There were more than 6,000 people on board. Everyone fled the advancing Red Army, civilians, wounded, and military. 4 hours after leaving a Gdańsk port for Copenhagen, the ship was attacked by the Soviet submarine L-3. The Goya was traveling in a convoy with smaller transport ships, one of which was experiencing engine trouble. The German formation could not move quickly. In the evening, the Soviet submarine commander, Konovalov, ordered to fire. 4 torpedoes tore through the Goya's hull just above the waterline. The ship sank within 7 minutes. Nearly 6,000 people perished in the freezing water. The escort ships managed to rescue only 182 survivors.
In 1945, the submarine commander Vladimir Konovalov was awarded the Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union for destroying the enemy transport.
The Goya was not the only evacuation ship sunk during the final phase of the war in the Baltic Sea. Operation Hannibal involved the Reich's largest vessels, among them there was the Wilhelm Gustloff. With 10 decks and powerful engines, it was one of the largest ships in the world.
The Wilhelm Gustloff was designed to carry 1,600 passengers and was known for its luxurious appointments. This liner was intended to promote the classless nature of the Nazi regime. As proof, all cabins were of equal size and comfort. A 5-day cruise, costing no more than a month's minimum wage, was affordable even for ordinary German workers.
Before the war began, the Gustloff completed 50 cruises around Europe. From September 1939, its civilian service ended. The ship was mobilized and converted into a hospital ship with 500 beds. When the evacuation from Prussia began in January 1945, the Wilhelm Gustloff could carry more people at once than any other ship of the Reich. On January 22, 1945, the boarding process eventually began. The wounded, military submarine cadets, and civilian refugees climbed aboard via the gangway. Nearly 10,000 people were packed onto a ship designed to carry only 1,500.
I never thought about a catastrophe. It seemed to me that we were safe here, sailing west on this unsinkable ship. Once we set sail, we felt finally free. It was a happiness that is hard to describe.
The fairway was small, and in order not to run into its own mines, the liner was not driven by zigzags, which confuse underwater hunters. The speed of the Gustloff was low. The overload and damage that the ship suffered during the bombardment of the Allies made itself felt. The decision to illuminate the ship's silhouette with signal lights in the night sea proved fatal, despite the intent to meet a minesweeper. A Soviet submarine spotted the resulting light on the horizon.
The helmsman signalman, Vinogradov, spotted lights in the distance. And the sonar operator reported, though our equipment wasn't exactly top-notch. Comrade Commander, I can distinctly hear the loud noise of propellers. Then the commander also came up to the bridge, took a look, saw the heavy escort, and eventually we moved in to close the distance.
The commander of the S-13 submarine was Captain Alexander Marinesco, a military submariner. He struggled with alcoholism and had been expelled from the Communist Party. Patrolling the Baltic in early 1945 was Marinesco's last chance to keep his officer's rank. He had narrowly avoided arrest just before this for going AWOL to visit his mistress.
Marinesco shadowed the liner for 2 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to open fire. He outmaneuvered the German ship from the shore side and opened fire from the surface position. The 3 torpedoes fired in quick succession began to tear apart the port side of the Gustloff. Passengers who had survived the explosions and had not drowned in the lower deck cabins scrambled for the lifeboats. Many of the most vulnerable perished in the panic and the crush. The Wilhelm Gustloff gradually sank deeper and deeper into the water. An hour after the attack, the ship went under.
German boats arriving at the scene of the disaster were able to rescue 1,215 people. Most of those who managed to escape the sinking ship did not survive in the freezing waters of the winter Baltic. A Soviet submarine attack killed 6,600 passengers on the Wilhelm Gustloff, according to official data. Unofficial estimates suggest over 9,000 victims.
It was history's greatest maritime disaster, sparking a debate that continues to this day. Was it heroism or a war crime? The argument for heroism is that, since the Wilhelm Gustloff was part of a military convoy, it was considered an auxiliary warship, and therefore, a legitimate target under naval warfare laws. 50% of those rescued were submariners, while only 5% were refugees. This indicates that the victims of Marinesco's attack were primarily German civilians, women and children. Naval warfare claimed the lives of tens of thousands of people, most of whom were not sailors or military personnel at the time of the sinking. For many, overcrowded transport ships were a lifeline, the only hope of escaping certain death. Yet, the brutal nature of war pushed commanders to strike their enemy in the most painful way possible. This is why the hunt at sea often targeted the largest and least protected vessels.